So welcome to fair housing. It's a super, super important topic. It always has been, but it seems like it's been brought even further to light with all that's going on in our country and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that if you weren't tuned into this before, you need to be tuned into it now, because the liabilities associated with discrimination are huge. It's $10,000 for the first offense and $50,000 if there is a second offense. So that's pretty scary stuff. And that's for both landlords as well as realtors. And realtors additionally can have their license suspended for a period of time. So there goes your livelihood. So it's really important that we tune into this stuff. And there are a lot of things that maybe we don't even totally think about, like small things. But I would say the biggest thing overall, I would say to you, is you must treat everyone equally. Everyone that you come in contact deserves equal treatment. And so I'm going to start us off by sharing my screen with you, and we're going to watch just a quick video that will drive home some of the points. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I am going to go to mail, I guess. Nope, that is not where I want to go. Hold on. That's not what I want. Okay, here we go. Can everybody see this?
Just your welcome to mail screen right now.
Yeah, welcome to mail screen too.
Oh,
Did you share your screen? Well, you did, because we could see this.
I thought I did. Let me stop sharing and start sharing again. We'll try it again. Okay, here we go. This is what I want to show you. Can you see that now?
Yes, it's a video, YouTube.
It's a house.
A house, brown house with a nice lawn, by the way.
Chances are you know a lot about fair housing laws, but why are discrimination lawsuits so common? And what can you do to make sure you're never involved in one? You're probably very familiar with the 7 protected classes defined by the Fair Housing Act.
I think someone needs to shut their speaker off.
Nationality, color, sex, familial status, and disability status. Chances are good that your state or city has even more protected classes than the federal government. Did you know in Washington, D.C., it's illegal to treat people differently because of their political affiliation? It's true. If you don't know the additional protected classes in your area, find out. In fair housing terms, discrimination means treating someone differently because of their membership in a protected class, and it's against the law. Most multifamily professionals don't intentionally discriminate, but fair housing lawsuits happen, in many cases because people make mistakes. So let's run through Grace Hill's top 10 fair housing mistakes, so you can make sure these missteps never happen in your community. Ready? Let's count them down. Number 10, forbidding kids from doing things, like saying children may not ride bikes on the sidewalk. Fair are required by law to allow them, whether it's a dog, a monkey, or even a miniature pony. Number 3, not realizing that hoarding isn't just the stuff of reality TV shows. It's a disability. Proceed with caution if you discover a resident is hoarding. Talk with your boss at once. Number 2, letting your maintenance team complete service requests in any order they like. To avoid any appearance of preferential treatment, establish a response system and stick to it. And the number 1 fair housing mistake is failing to train everyone who interacts with customers on fair housing requirements. And we mean everyone: leasing, management, maintenance. If they talk to the public, they need to be trained. Don't let these fair housing mistakes happen to you or your coworkers. Learn more online. And remember, it's just to be fair.
Okay, so what did everybody think about that?
Good.
Oh, you have to unmute.
Yeah, learned a couple new things that I wasn't aware of before, particularly with service animals.
Yeah, I didn't know.
That's always
Monkey.
a surprise to people who think, oh, well, if my landlord said no pets, it's no pets. But as it pointed out in the video, service animals are not considered pets. They're necessities. We just have to hope that nobody has a service miniature pony, as they mentioned.
Well,
That would be a rough one.
Imagine you can't have that in an apartment.
Ridiculous.
But it could be an issue. And, you know, people who have any one of these disabilities or are any kind of a protected class, if they have been discriminated against a couple of times already, and then you or your landlord come along and discriminate, they get to a point where they're not going to take it anymore. And we just cannot let that happen. We can't. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who had one of these disabilities. And can you all see my screen still?
No. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, where it says
Race,
it's unlawful
color.
to discriminate. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the first ones with the dots next to them are the federal guidelines. So the federal guidelines say you cannot discriminate on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familiar status, meaning like people with children under 18 or who are expecting a child, domestic partner status, disability, and then the last 3 are New Jersey laws, which are in addition to the national laws. So affectional or sexual orientation, marital status, or domestic partner status. So these are all the protected classes. And later I'm going to be showing you some examples of things that have happened to some of these protected classes. But right now we're just talking about them. Anybody have any other reaction to that little video?
Well, the handicap parking, I was surprised to see that. I guess you need to accommodate.
Yeah. Now understand, you know, that video was not just aimed at realtors, it was aimed at owners and management companies of, you know, complexes. So I don't think for you renting residential real estate, for the most part, anything like that would come up. But on the other hand, if you are renting somebody an apartment in a whole complex, you should be aware that they do have the right to ask the landlord to accommodate them with a special parking spot. So keep that in mind.
I was a
And
little,
then,
the general talk, like I guess if I was showing a house and someone says, I'm looking for a bigger home for my family, I would probably ask, well, how big is your family?
and that's a very natural question to ask. I mean, if someone is shopping for a home, you know, to buy, that's certainly a fair question to ask. But when you're dealing with rentals, you're really not supposed to get into that.
So would
So,
it-
and I know that seems weird, but it's part of this discrimination thing. So,
Would it be appropriate to ask how many rooms they would need?
you could ask how many rooms, yeah, or how many bedrooms and bathrooms are they looking for? Yeah. And, you know, things are going to come up in conversation. I mean, it's not that most people won't eventually tell you about their family if they have one, but you're asking them specifically if they don't get a certain place, they could be wondering if they were discriminated against.
Right.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
What if you have a 2-bedroom apartment that someone wants you to rent for them and they have like 4 kids they want to put in it, you know, and the landlord doesn't want 6 people in an apartment?
That's a tricky situation, because unless the landlord is living in one of the units, if it's a multifamily, they cannot discriminate. It's difficult. It really is. And one thing I will say to you, if you are going to be listing a property for rent and you're having your conversations with the landlord about how it's going to go, and if that landlord says, I don't want any families, or I don't want any children, or I don't want any people from Czechoslovakia, I'm just choosing, you know, a national origin. You at that point have to say, I'm really sorry, that's illegal. I cannot support you if that's your position. And you really would either have to convince him or her that they can't do that, or you need to walk away from the listing and just say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Your license is way more important than the couple of dollars you would make from any rental that you could do. We had a situation over the summer where one of our agents listed an apartment for rent, and a group came along who wanted to rent the apartment for, it happened to be an organization that helps autistic children and adults. And the organization wanted to rent the apartment and have 2 autistic adults living there with supervision. And the landlord refused. And I got a call from the other agent, the person who was working with the people from the autism organization, telling me this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I immediately called our agent and said to her, you need to make your landlord understand he can't do this. I mean, he could refuse them if he could show that financially they don't have the money to do it, or some other reason, but he can't refuse them because of who they are. He apparently, the landlord, talked to his attorney who supported his position. And so when the agent told me that, I said, well, then I'm sorry. You're going to have to tell him you're withdrawing his listing unconditionally. We cannot be associated with it. And that's what happened. She withdrew it unconditionally because he would not be convinced to, not feel that way. So it's super, super important. If they tell you something right up front when you're doing listing paperwork, you got to walk away. You just have to walk away. Now, you'll notice here there's something else that is mentioned. It says New Jersey law makes it illegal for a landlord to refuse to rent to a person who has a Section 8 voucher or another type of housing assistance. Does anyone know what Section 8 is? Have you heard of that?
Yes.
I've heard
Okay.
of it, yes.
Okay, so it's a program, a government program, a HUD program, Housing, Urban, and Development, that helps lower income people be able to rent an apartment. And what it is they either pay the rent or they subsidize the rent. And I get calls, in the course of a year, I probably get calls 5 or 6 times from one or another of our agents saying, someone is here, from Section 8, and I don't know what to do, and, I don't think, is that a good thing for my landlord to do? And actually, I have a personal experience with Section 8 from when I was actively working as a realtor, selling things and renting things. And it actually is kind of an advantage from the standpoint that the government is always timely in making their payments, which is more than we can say about some private people. So, you might have a landlord who says, I don't want to take someone who's Section 8. And again, you have to say, I'm really sorry, but it's the law. It's discrimination if you refuse. If everything else, is correct, they're financially okay. Sometimes you'll get somebody who will have a Section 8 subsidy, but tells you that they then will put, an extra $100 or $200 of their own money, which they can't afford, down on it because they're trying to get a little nicer place than what they would get with just their Section 8 subsidy. So you need to be aware that that is something that may come up. And sometimes with a Section 8, the government will send somebody to check the apartment to make sure that it's okay. It's not like they're going to make you revamp the whole apartment or anything, but sometimes they send somebody out just to make sure that, number one, it's for real and, it's what they've been told that it is, and just to make sure that it basically seems like a safe place for the client to be.
This might be too far off, and if it is, you could just tell me and I'll talk about it another time. So I'm potentially working with a group of people who want to stay with a certain distance to their religious order. So I have to find like a 0.8 miles when I'm showing them that. Does that become a problem? And they've told me how far they want to live from a certain place of worship.
No,
Okay.
because in other words, no, that's okay. That they need to be a certain radius from their houses, their home of worship. Yeah, that's okay. But it wouldn't be okay for a landlord to say, I don't want to rent to those people, if it was the other way around. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a different little video. Let's see, whoops, if I can get to it. The bar for the Zoom is coming down over what I need to click. Oh, geez. Let's see if I can move it. Can I move it? Yes. Okay. Here we go. This is what I want to do. Okay. This is from the National Association of Realtors.
I don't know why landlords think it's so hard to have assistance animals like my dog Allie. Building manager was a real problem. When you have access to so much information, you have the responsibility to be very careful how you get the information. Share that information with clients and MLS.
of Housing Point. Today, we'll be discussing the Fair Housing Act in honor of its 50th anniversary in 2018. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Fair Housing Act on April 11, 1968, just days after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Dr. King was the country's most notable proponent of fair housing, marching in the streets of Chicago in 1966 to end the years of housing discrimination experienced in communities across the country. The Act currently prohibits discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin. In honor of the 50-year milestone, we'll address ways that the Fair Housing Act protects real estate professionals and your customers, and to help you navigate your responsibilities under the Act. We'll also look at how the Fair Housing Act addresses harassment and retaliation in the housing context. Finally, we'll review the best practices for criminal background checks of housing applicants. Our first story profiles a veteran who has an emotional disability and wants his assistance animal to live with him. Many landlords still aren't familiar with the Fair Housing Act's requirement that housing providers accommodate tenants who require assistance animals. Horace Miller reports from Chicago.
Philip, a Marine veteran, is joining me today along with his assistance animal, Alex. Philip and Alex have been a team for 6 years. After serving tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Philip was wounded and developed post-traumatic stress. Now Alex helps him get through some very difficult days and nights.
Alex is a part of me. I really can't imagine life without him. Somehow, he always knows when I'm having a bad time. Like last night. He woke me up so I didn't start having a nightmare. And before hours, I would wake up thinking I was in the middle of a firefight. Not anymore. He's the one thing that keeps me calm.
And your doctor suggests you benefit from assistance animal like Alex?
Correct. My VA doctors have eliminated most of the medications I used to take since I started using an assistance animal. One of my doctors even said, my dog is the best medicine for me. But try telling that to some of these landlords.
Landlords and building management need to be aware of the law. They are required to accommodate people with physical or mental disabilities and permit them to have an assistance animal, even when a building has a no pets rule. If a tenant with a disability makes a request for an exception to the rule, building management must accommodate them. Unless there is a threat to the health and safety of others, the housing provider should consider and grant the request. Any animal that provides a disability-related service to the disabled can be considered an assistance animal, even monkeys, birds, or reptiles. Your building has a no pets rule, so what did you do to support your request for an exception?
Since my disability is post-traumatic stress, which isn't something you can see, I provided management with a letter from my VA doctor. The letter explains that I have a disability, and Alex provided me with disability-related assistance.
Well, that should be all you need to have your animal live with you, right?
You would think so, but then the landlord wanted to know what my disability was, what medication I was taking, and some other health-related information, which I didn't think was any of his business.
According to the Fair Housing Act, housing providers and real estate professionals are not allowed to ask for information regarding medications, copies of medical records, or any details about the nature or severity of a person's disability. A letter from a doctor detailing the patient's need for an assistance animal should be all it takes to allow for an exception to any no pets rule. Of course, there are some people who try to exploit this right, and fake documents can be obtained from uncredible sources. If you suspect that documents are not credible, make a written record and advise the property owner of your concerns. Then have them advise you regarding next steps.
For more information about the accommodation for assistance animals, visit fairhousing.realtor. Our next story concerns a mom who not only had to deal with harassment and retaliation from her landlord, but also another problem, discrimination against families with children, a protected class under the Fair Housing Act.
Anne is a divorced mother living with her 9-year-old daughter, Katie. She thought she had found the perfect apartment for the two of them. But soon after moving in, reported his inappropriate behavior, he retaliated by shutting off her water.
At first, he seemed really friendly, going out of his way to see if I needed anything. But then it became uncomfortable, and I complained. The next day, I went to give my daughter a bath, and the water had been shut off. And when I called in and learned about the problem, he returned the call.
Under the Fair Housing Act, just a single incident of harassment, such as a demand for sexual favors, may be enough evidence to constitute a hostile living environment. The Fair Housing Act also prohibits retaliation against anyone who reports discriminatory housing practice. Now, Ann wants to find a different one-bedroom apartment for herself and her daughter, but she's running into something else. Landlords who don't want to rent to her because she has a child living with her.
First, I had to deal with management companies that don't want to rent to families who have kids.
Isn't it against the law for them to even ask if you have children?
There's ways of finding out. Social media, for instance. Usually they'll ask the ages of everyone in the family on those applications that you have to fill out. Or they will ask you, so how old are your kids? Out of the blue. And then before you know it, you're answering the kind of thinking. And suddenly they don't have any apartments available to rent right now. Or ever. So that's why they're leaving our names. And sometimes landlords will actually say in their ads that they're renting to adults only, or they will imply that they don't want kids.
Familiar status is a protected class under the Fair Housing Act, making it unlawful for housing providers to deny housing outright because a family has children living with them under the age of 18. These same protections apply to families who are expecting or adopting children. Additionally, housing providers may not restrict families with children to live in certain areas of the building complex, or refuse to let them use certain facilities. There are exceptions, including certain types of housing designed just for people 55 years or older. But for the majority of people looking for a place to live, the ages of their family members should have no bearing on their ability to find a home.
My family's just my daughter and me, so I want to rent a one-bedroom because I'm on a limited budget. Even though there are buildings that allow kids, I was told that I have to rent a two-bedroom because there are two people in the family.
But I'm sure they must allow people who are roommates get a one-bedroom. And what about people who are married?
Exactly what my broker said. Amazing how easy it was to get one bedroom when she brought that up and made it clear that we belong. To learn more about the Fair Housing Act's protections against harassment, retaliation, and discrimination against families with children, visit fairhousing.org. Our final fair housing story is about big data and its link to steering. I don't have to tell you, big data is everywhere. It's in your pocket. It's in your wallet, your house, your car, and of course, on social media. Big data helps you offer enhanced service to your prospects, but it can also lead to accusations of steering. Or it's still a report from San Jose, California. In real estate, data about properties and customers is readily available, and what used to take months to collect, organize, and analyze now takes only minutes or even seconds, and it seems to grow exponentially every day. There are even a number of services that aggregate all the data for a property to make it useful for a single housing transaction.
So what kind of information is available to you?
Before you even meet or speak to a client, you can learn their race, color, country of origin, disability, sexual orientation, familial status, and religion without much searching. But that same information can also be used to discriminate.
Interesting. How so?
With so much data available about a prospect, you have to be extra careful not to use that information in a discriminatory manner. You also have to be very careful to avoid steering. So steering is when a real estate professional guides a prospect to or away from a particular community or type of housing based on their race, ethnicity, or another protected class. In every instance, we are always obligated to provide our clients with equal professional services.
So what's the best way to avoid this?
Use the equal professional service model. Ask yourself, do I have objective information from my customer about the kind of house that they want to buy? Have I let my customer set the limits on the size of the house and its location? Have I offered them a variety of homes to choose from? careful not to target ads to or away from protected classes. Otherwise, you could get into trouble for steering. When you write an ad for a house, you want to describe the property by highlighting the positives of the housing, not the ethnic makeup of the neighborhood or desired characteristics of a potential buyer.
How about when you meet with clients face to face?
Well, you want to ask the customer about their needs, size, style, features of the home, type of convenient transportation, where they can shop. You want to avoid questions about their religion or ethnic background. And remember, you're there to help them find a home based on their individual preferences, not yours.
So, what if someone wants to know about the quality of the schools in the area?
Well, you want to avoid making a value judgment about the quality of schools. Even with all the data that we have, opinions on schools' quality can be very subjective. Instead, maybe refer a potential buyer to the website of the school district so that they can do their own research based on their needs. You want to let the clients set their own limits.
You must get a lot of questions about the crime rates and the demographics of different neighborhoods.
You want to avoid discussing crime rates or the demographics of the people in an area. If a client wants to know about demographics in the area, direct them to the Census Bureau website. Don't discuss the race or the religion of people who live in the neighborhood. And same with questions about crime rate. I always suggest that they talk to the local police or go to the library or use the internet so that they can find the facts. A broker should never say that one area is safer than another.
So, you suggest giving a client the tools to find their own information and make their own judgments.
Well, in the end, I think that's more helpful. And also by offering a variety of choices, you avoid unwittingly excluding property that the customer might like. In the end, it's up to the client. If you are pressed by a client for your opinion, always be professional. The more subjective a question is, the more risk there is to give an inappropriate or even unlawful answer. Ask them what their concerns are and then refer them to the appropriate sources of information. You want to avoid making judgments, offering opinions, and sharing your perceptions. Tell a client it's your policy to help them make their own decisions. So even with an abundance of data at your fingertips, remember that any decision should always be left to the client. It's best for them, and then you can avoid trouble with the Fair Housing Act. For more information on big data and how to avoid steering, visit fairhousing.realtor. Horace Miller joins me now via satellite to discuss criminal background checks. So, Horace, what have you learned in your travels around the country?
Well, Sandra, the criminal background check issue poses a pretty daunting problem for people with a criminal history, as some individuals still seem to have trouble getting an application approved to rent an apartment.
That doesn't seem fair.
It's more than not fair. In some instances, it can be illegal.
How should real estate professionals handle these situations?
Landlords should implement a written policy for criminal background checks of housing applicants and apply that policy consistently to every applicant. A written policy gets everyone on the same page. It makes it clear that the same standards apply to everyone. And it should be crafted with the safety and protection of all residents and property in mind. At the same time, it's against the fair housing laws for management companies to have a blanket ban on anybody who has a conviction.
So what kind of information should a housing provider be looking for when formulating a policy?
A landlord should allow an individual to provide additional information and should consider a number of factors when evaluating a housing applicant's criminal history. For instance, how long ago was the conviction? 5 years? 10 years? Avoid looking back indefinitely into a person's criminal history. How old were they? Were there any extenuating or mitigating circumstances? Have they been through a successful rehab? Was the crime a misdemeanor or a felony? Was it violent or nonviolent? And a housing provider should never consider arrest as part of the applicant's criminal history. To sum up, real estate professionals and management companies have to weigh the protection of the residents and property as they evaluate someone with a past conviction. A good policy helps those who have paid their debt to society find a place to live.
Thanks for that excellent report, Horace.
Thank you.
For more information about criminal background checks, visit fairhousing.realtor. The National Association of Realtors has set an exemplary standard for equality in housing, which its members are obligated to uphold. In fact, NAR's code of ethics goes beyond on the federal fair housing law and some state laws by prohibiting discrimination by its members based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And realtors do not take their responsibility lightly. Even when a state law does not prohibit discrimination against a client that is a member of the LGBT community, a broker's participation in such discrimination would run against their ethical obligations under NAR's Code of Ethics. As a leading advocate for fair housing, the National Association of Realtors has taken a clear stand that everyone deserves the equal right to purchase or reside in the home of their choice without regard to sexual orientation or gender identity. Each of NAR's 1.2 million members have made a commitment to upholding this ideal. 2018 marks the first 50 years of this groundbreaking legislation, which gives everyone the right to be in the housing of their choice. We leave the next 50 years in your capable hands.
So what did you think about that? Any comments?
Yeah, you know, as far as criminal backgrounds, I guess it's interesting.
Yeah, it is, because obviously there's all kinds of things that fall under criminal backgrounds. I mean, fortunately, maybe because we're at higher price points in our area, to my knowledge, we haven't run into it, maybe ever. No one has ever come to me and said, what should I do about this? But the one thing I will say is you should always encourage your landlord to do a credit check, a background check, and there's also an eviction check that can be done. We did have one situation where a landlord actually met people who wanted to rent his place and said to our agent, oh, don't worry about any of that. You know, their credit check or any of that. I'm perfectly comfortable with the people. They were so nice. And the people moved in, and it turned out to be a nightmare. And upon investigation, it turned out that the husband had a very recent criminal background, and to the point that it was potentially a danger to the other people who were living in that property. So it's not that you can't look into it, but you have to be careful about how you do it. Yeah.
Sally, is it the responsibility of the landlord to see through, you know, to have the credit check, the criminal background, so on?
Well, you as the realtor are going to facilitate that in most cases, or you're going to have a discussion with your landlord when you're about to list a property, and you say to them, what do you want to require of the people who potentially want to rent? There's a whole array of things. There's a rental application, there's the credit check, there's the background check, there's the eviction check where they can go back and see if it's on a record somewhere that they were evicted from an apartment. So that really has to be left up to the landlord, but with your encouragement to do those things, we also encourage landlords to at least talk to the person on the phone, but it has to be the landlord's decision. Never be the realtor who says, oh, pick these people, because sometimes people who seem like the nicest people in the world turn out to be the worst tenants ever.
Sorry to hear that.
So you know, you always want to make it the landlord's decision with your guidance.
Right.
And the other important thing I think that came up in this video that we just saw is that many times, whether you're selling a house or renting something, you're going to find that people with children will ask you about the school. and you really should not be giving your opinion about the schools. Because for one thing, I'm a former teacher, and I would say to people, you know what? All the schools around here have a good reputation. Some may be a little better reputation than others, but it really comes down to the experience that your child has in a particular class with a particular teacher, which is nothing that you can research in advance. But then I would point them to, there are websites, there's one called, I believe it's greatschools.org, where they can go online and pull up information. If someone ever asks you, so what are the demographics like? You know, who's living in this town? You definitely do not want to touch that, and you have to immediately say, that is not something I am able to discuss. But if you go to the Census Bureau website, if that's important to you, you can find it out.
I have two questions. Could you tell someone it's a blue ribbon school? Like you say, well, this.
Yeah, I mean, you can say something that's a fact, and that's a fact, you know, that is verifiable. But where we get into trouble potentially is giving opinion. You know, like, oh yeah, I think that's a great district, or that's a great school. Just don't go there.
Then I have a person who asked me recently, she wants to look in diverse areas. And I said, I don't really know, and she kind of worries me a little bit, but I said, I really don't know what you mean. What areas do you want to look at? And she goes, diverse areas. It's just been going into that one word.
Yeah, so to that person, I would say, you know, I am not allowed to discuss demographics at all. And honestly, because I have not studied what the makeup is of these different towns. But if that's important to you, I would recommend you look at the census site, and that will tell you demographics. Yeah, because you can't be involved in that. You know, and then if they do go on the Census Bureau site and they say, okay, here are the towns that I want to look in, that's fine. But I'm going to show you something else that'll sort of go along with this. So under the Fair Housing Act, it is against the law to refuse to rent or sell to someone. Tell you housing, this is a big one. You can't tell one person, because you don't like them for whatever the reason, that housing is unavailable if it really is. If they can prove that, that is a huge discrimination problem. If someone comes to you with certain parameters of what they want to see, you are to offer them the whole array of wherever they could find what they are looking for, you know, no matter what kind of town, neighborhood you think it's in. You also can't set different terms, conditions, or privileges for the sale or rental of a dwelling. You can't provide different housing services or facilities. You definitely can never advertise to, you know, like prefer, you know, white people only, which you cannot say anything like that. And again, if a landlord is suggesting that, you need to walk away. The next part doesn't really apply because we're not doing mortgage loans or insurance or appraisal, so we can skip over that. But a landlord can't refuse to make reasonable modifications for housing if someone has one of the protected classes, a disability of some kind. This failed to design and construct housing in an accessible manner. I mean, that should not be something that even comes up for you as the realtor, because if someone is building a house or building a building, they're going to have to submit their plans to the town, and the town will tell them what they require. You cannot harass, coerce, intimidate, or interfere with anyone exercising or assisting someone else with his or her fair housing rights. So these are important things, and it leads me to the next thing that I want to talk to you about. 3 years ago, I believe, a few years ago anyway, there is a newspaper that covers Long Island called Newsday. And people at Newsday had heard that there were realtors and people on Long Island who were discriminating, that certain towns were pretty much white people only, and if you were Black or brown or Hispanic or Asian, you were not welcome. And so they did an expose to see if realtors were participating in this. And what they did, and what could happen to you, is that they sent out at different times 2 different sets of people, one white, one of color or with some other, from some other protected class, with the exact parameters, and they sat back and they watched how were those people treated and what areas were they shown houses in. Do you remember from your real estate school the term steering?
Yes.
Do you remember what that is?
Yep.
What is it,
Directing
right?
clients to particular areas because of the presumption, they feel
Right.
more comfortable.
And that
I think they do.
is a no-no. We can't steer people to certain areas. So if a white person comes in and says, I want a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath with a 2-car garage, and I can spend $500,000, and you show them houses in a certain area, and at some time thereafter, someone who is Black or brown or Asian or part of any protected class comes in with those exact same parameters, obviously the same houses might not be still on the market, but you need to be taking them to the same areas. Unless they tell you, I don't want to look in that area. Of course, that's a different situation. But the state of New Jersey, I haven't heard of it recently, maybe because of COVID, but the state of New Jersey has been known to send out testers for this too. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the fines are big. $10,000 for the first offense, $50,000 if they can prove a second offense. And I'm going to show you now some of the things that happened out on Long Island. These are actual test cases. So test number 33, an agent refused to show homes to a Black buyer unless the buyer signs an exclusive broker's agreement, just hours before she invites a white buyer on house tours without requiring such an agreement. Test number 30, an agent offers to drive a white house hunter to tour homes, provide 79 listings, oh my goodness, and escorts the potential buyer to see 4 homes without proof of financial standing. And then that same agent tells a Black person who was seeking the same type of home that in order for her to show them homes, they had to produce a mortgage pre-qualification, which was not required for the white people. Test number 78, an agent tells a Hispanic house hunter that he helps customers only after they sign an exclusive broker's agreement and secure mortgage pre-approval. The agent provides listings and tours to a white house hunter without requiring either document. So you see the theme here is you have to do consistently the same thing for everybody. And then the last one is an agent tells black and white house hunters that he provides listing and home tours only to customers who have mortgage pre-approvals. And then he bends his stated policy for the white potential buyer. Can't do that. It's got to be consistent across the board. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. Any questions, comments about it?
As far as the credit and background check, who's responsible financially to arrange for that? Would that be the landlord?
The tenant. The tenant.
Oh, the tenant.
We have a company that we use called InsideCredit.com.
Okay.
You might want to just look into it so you're a little familiar with it. And we have an account with them so that you could give the website to your client. They go on, they pay, I believe it's $35 for all 3 reports. They're pretty quick. And Reese is telling me yes, it's $35. Thank you, Reese. And when they go to the website, they put in their own credit card, but you will get the report.
Oh, got it. And what are the 3 reports
Yeah.
again?
Now, keep in mind, this is important too. Keep in mind that when you get that report, that's a lot of personal information. And that report should not be shared with other people. Sometimes that's tricky because the listing agent is maybe, trying to get a hold of it. If they're requiring it to be saved, I want you to go to your clients and say, do you give permission for this to be shared? And then once that transaction has ended, make sure that those reports are not, lying around somewhere where other people could see them. They should be in your loop, which would be a secure place for them.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? I think we'll wrap it up here then. I'm going to maybe see that the word gets out a little better next week for everybody to come, because next week I have 3 classes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that I'm doing. Reese, can you remind me of the order? Thank you. Actually, I might be able to look on my calendar. Okay, Monday at 1 is how to do listing paperwork. Wednesday at 1 is how to write a contract. And Friday at 1 is open house tours and certification. So there's a lot more to doing an open house than just hanging out at the house from 1 to 4. So I want to make sure you know all the things that you can do to prepare that will give you the highest possibility of selling that house and or getting more clients. So that's the lineup for next week.
Something you could recommend to new, I called agents to see if I can help them out in the open houses. Another way of going about helping people in the open house that, putting my name out there, free to help you.
One of the things that you can do that's really good, it's a little more difficult in this COVID era because we're not all coming into the office and seeing each other. But one of the best ways is to try to get to know people. And if there's an open house like that you would love to do, I would recommend making an appointment to go preview that home and then call the agent and say, I just went to see your home at 123 Main Street. I really love it. I would be so thrilled if I could do an open house there or help you do an open house there. and even offer to do something like a lot of agents today are, when they're doing an open house, they kind of have a person stationed in front of the house as like the checker, I guess I would say, a person who's going to make sure people sign the COVID form, make sure that they're wearing a mask before they go into the house, and gloves and booties if that's what the homeowner is requiring. Sometimes they require hand sanitizer. And that's not the greatest place to be in an open house because you're not having the full interaction. You're not actually showing the house, but it might be your foot in the door for someone that they might say, like, I really appreciate that you were willing to come and do that for me. Next time I need somebody inside the house, I'll call you. It's just a thought. And of course, the biggest suggestion is get your own listing. Then you can do one whenever you want. Be lead generating and looking for listings all the time, because listings bring you more listings and more buyers if you do a great job. But come to the class on Friday for open houses, because I'm going to teach you a lot of things that will really help you to do the best open house ever. There's so many agents who take it so lightly and just kind of show up and hang out there for a couple hours, when really there's a lot you could do to maximize it. When you're doing an open house, you need to think of each person who comes in as someone who's interviewing you for a job. Because you know what? They might be looking for a buyer agent. They might be trying to decide who should list their house. So you have to go into it with that mindset that you're going to razzle and dazzle them with your knowledge of the market, not just of that house. And we're going to talk about all that on Friday.
Sally, it's perfect. Just what I've been looking for.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you
you
for
too.
being here. And I'll see you next week.
All righty.